Yo, what is up everybody? It is your boy Zed here, back at it again to drop What If Deku Was Zenitsu's Reincarnation. Now, I hope you guys do go on to enjoy this What If in case you're a brand new viewer, because this is basically just going to be a little bit of a rebranding of an old What If that I had on the channel. However, I decided to make a couple of tweaks and adjustments to the What If, and since I had this dope image, I figured, you know what, why not bring this What If back for the one time. So if you are an old viewer, then I hope you go on to enjoy it just like you did the first time, and if you are a newcomer, then hope you enjoy the What If. Okay, so where we're actually going to be starting our story off is essentially the day that Deku was born. See, on this particular version of our story, we're actually going to have the inclusion of one more character being present. And I'm sure many of you guys already know who it is. Jigoro, the master and the former pillar of, well, the Demon Slayer or the Hashiras or all that stuff. He's essentially going to be Deku's grandfather and the father of Inko Midoriya now. Used to have, her father's last name, obviously, but seeing as she got married, it obviously had to change. Now, things would pretty much play out as normal, except this version of Deku would pretty much look like a My Hero Academia style version of what Zenitsu looks like. I think he would quite literally look like frame by frame a version of Zenitsu just in the My Hero Academia world. And that's essentially what Deku's pretty much going to look like in this version. With that being said, his childhood would pretty much just play out as you guys would expect it to play out. He would have pretty much the same encounters with normal people that he does, such as Bakugo and Bakugo's little friend group, except, obviously Deku's hair is going to be, not green. So that's pretty much the only change to the story. Now, this is when we're now actually going to jump over to the day when Deku's pretty much told that he's quirkless. At this point, Deku still wanted to become a hero, and he pretty much has the same personality as the Deku that we have in canon, except he's going to be a little bit more of a scaredy cat, kind of in the way that Zenitsu is. Seeing as he gets terrified of things very easily, and one of his biggest fears is actually going to be spiders. As you guys already know, I had to definitely bring that in from the Demon Slayer. And, that's essentially what Deku's childhood is going to be like. See, Deku would still be told that he's quirkless, and this would actually break Deku's heart. After this, Deku would go home and cry about it, and, we would still have the same encounter with Inko and Deku, where Inko basically tells him that she's sorry and that she wishes things were different. And, well, something would change in Deku. After this, he would stop caring about becoming a hero, and instead of focusing on that, he would end up focusing on, girls around him. He would end up taking an interest into them, and he would basically get that little Zenitsu persona of being a little bit of a weirdo, where Zenitsu always is chasing after girls who clearly don't want him. And that's essentially how Deku's going to be. He's basically going to try to go after almost every single girl in his classroom, and we're essentially going to have Bakugo, instead of, thinking that Deku's a weirdo for, trying to become a hero, he's just gonna be like, yo, this kid is so weird. Why doesn't he leave these girls alone? They clearly don't want him. They'd rather be with somebody like me with an actual quirk. I'm gonna become a pro hero someday. As, of course that's going on. And, this is when we would then have the essential Deku pretty much just growing up like that. Now, this is when we're actually just going to pretty much just time skip to the day where Deku's actually 6 years old, and he comes home from school after pretty much getting rejected for the 1,000th time by the same girl that he's been going after for the last couple of months. The girl's parents would have definitely told Deku to leave her alone, and, Deku's not really doing anything mean or, exactly wrong, but he is, being annoying, I guess you could say. And, we would have Deku getting home, as he would basically tell his mother, Inko, that he failed again. And she would say, Izuku, I think you should leave that girl alone. I mean, maybe it's time to move on to a different person who would want you. As Deku would say, yeah, but nobody really wants me. I mean, I'm quirkless after all. As she would look down and she would proceed to, mumble sorry under her breath that she wishes things were different. And this is when Deku would go to his room saying that he's just going to go watch the computer or something. As she would say, okay, and Izuku would go off to his room. Shortly after this, Izuku's grandfather would actually arrive to the house saying, "Hello, family," as he would walk in the door, and Inko would basically look at her father. She would say, "Hey," as they would have a little bit of a reunion. And this is when Jigoro, or, Izuku's father, would actually ask where the little guy's at. As Deku would, Inko, would say that he's in his room. He's pretty disappointed right now. He just got home from school and he got rejected again. As, the grandfather would say, "What, again? What do you mean? He's 6 years old, isn't he?" As she would say, "Yeah, but ever since he was told he was quirkless, he pretty much just gave up on that and started focusing on girls. It's weird, but, whatever gets his mind off of being a pro hero, I guess." As, Izuku's grandfather would look at him and he would proceed to basically walk inside the room, as he would say, "Hey," as, Izuku would look at his grandfather and say, "Grandpa," as he would go over there and rush over to him, as he would hug him. And immediately his grandfather would basically ask Deku if what Inko told him was true, as he would say that it is, that he got rejected again. And he would say that that's not what matters. What matters is that he's over here liking girls at this young of an age. He's like, "You need to calm down, boy." As Deku would say, "I can't help it. It's the only thing that gets my mind off of, being a failure." As, Izuku's grandfather would just look down and say, "You're not a failure. Don't worry. There's still a way for you to become a hero." As Inko would say, "There is?" And she would proceed to, and, Izuku's grandfather would then look at her and say, "There is." As she would say, "How?" As he would proceed to tell her that he can teach her his techniques. As Inko would at first be like, "No, I don't think his body could even handle that. Like, Dad, you're so much stronger than anybody else is, and you did it all without a quirk, but I don't think this type of training that you did is meant for everybody. I mean, the things that you were doing at his age were not normal. They were insane." As he would proceed to look at Inko and say that, "I can make him like that. I can make him powerful, so that his goal of becoming a hero never goes away. He can go back to pretty much aspiring to become a pro hero, just like, most of the other students of his age." As Inko would look at him and he would proceed to say that, doesn't she want that for Izuku? As we would then have, her pretty much begrudgingly accepting, as she would say, "Well, alright." As this is when he would smile and say that he's gonna basically whip Izuku into shape. As, this is actually when we're actually going to be having, or when Izuku's going to be having his 6th grade, not 6th grade, but kindergarten summer. As over this time, Inko would basically let Izuku basically go to, her grandfather's house. As he would actually go over there by the mountains, and we would then have Deku essentially doing very simple training with his grandfather, doing things such as climbing trees and doing sit-ups and push-ups, as well as learning how to throw a couple of punches and throw kicks. He would be learning nothing but the basics, seeing as he's only 6 years old, and on the day that he would basically be climbing the tree, he would be out of breath as he would say, "Grandpa, I can't do this. This is impossible. I'm 6 years old." As he would say, I want to become a hero, but this is just too much." As he would basically have a little bit of a moment that, Zenitsu had with his master in the anime, where we basically got to see what Zenitsu's backstory was like. And, this is when Deku would proceed to essentially just look at his grandfather, as he would say he doesn't know if he can live up to his expectations. As he would tell Izuku that no matter what happens, he'll never disappoint him, and that he doesn't have expectations for him. He just wants the best for him. And this is why he pushes him so hard, because he knows Izuku can do it. As Izuku would look at his grandfather and he would then tell him to get down from there. As Deku would say, "Alright, I guess I'll give it a try." As he would proceed to essentially start climbing down the tree, and this is when Deku would proceed to essentially get down there. As he would say, "Hey, look, I did it." And this is essentially how Deku's life is going to be going on for the next couple of years to come. Every summer, Deku would go over to his grandpa's and train. And any time that they would have breaks, or any time that, Izuku's grandfather can come over to visit them, he would essentially always train Izuku and teach him brand new things that he could work on, such as wielding a sword. He would definitely have to teach Izuku how to wield a sword, seeing as that's essentially what he was taught. And in terms of the next couple of years, Deku would slowly stop looking at girls. He would still have that weird thing of his, but it would slowly start focusing more on his training, seeing as he doesn't have the time for that right now. But later, he's going to get back to that later, definitely. Trust me, guys. We would then have Deku essentially seeing his grandpa by the time that he's about, let's say, 11 years old. And at this point, Deku definitely knows how to take a fall. He's pretty adept with his legs. And at this point, Deku knows how to use a sword. Not actually using any of the breaths yet, and at this point Deku was still struggling with using any of the forms. The only form that he's come even a little close to performing would be the Thunderclap and Flash, the first form. But there's like 5 other forms that he can't use, and it's hurting him slowly. And at this point, of course, Deku's 11, and his grandfather would actually tell Deku that, if he can't perform any of the other forms, he should just hone the one form that he can and train it to perfection. As this is when Deku would open his eyes and realize that he should have been doing that this whole time. He should have been training that one thing that he had to perfection instead of wasting the rest of the time trying to get the hang of the other moves. As his grandfather would look at Izuku and as he would chuckle and say, "You still have time, kid. Promise me that you'll keep up with the training and, get that first form down packed by the time of the UA entrance exams." As we would then have Deku basically looking at his grandfather, as he would say that he will, as this is when Deku would proceed to essentially spend the next couple of years until we have the day of the sludge villain, essentially training. Oh, and also guys, apologies if you guys can hear any dog barking in the background. It's the neighbors' annoying dogs, and oh my god, they are so annoying, but I can't exactly make them be quiet right now. So anyways, with that being said, guys, we would then have Deku essentially just going by as, normal things. Of course, every now and then he would be a little desperate and, try to go talk to some girls and weird them out just like he would in canon. And Bakugo would have essentially just decided that he's going to stay away from that weirdo or freak, I guess what he calls him. And that, he's just going to basically focus on other kids to bully. As we would have Deku basically just on his own lane, doing his own thing. And Bakugo would pretty much just leave him alone for the time that, well, they're together. This is when we're basically going to skip on over to the day of the sludge villain, as at this point, Deku can use the first form, the Thunderclap and Flash, to its fullest extent, in the same way that Zenitsu can. And at this point, Deku can only use it whenever he truly needs it. He still can't use it in a moment of in a moment of notice. He can't exactly use it at will. But Deku can, he's not half as scared as Zenitsu. Actually, no, yeah, let's say he's half as much of a scaredy cat as Zenitsu. And the other half is he's half as much into girls as Zenitsu is too. So, with that being said, Deku would basically be sitting down as the teacher would, pretty much throw the papers in the air saying that he knows they all want to become heroes, as everybody would start flashing off their quirks, with some people using their weird eye quirks, and they would start, having long fingers, and that buff kid in the class, the kid with the long neck, as, I don't know if you guys remember, but that one guy, Daddy long neck, I said it like that because, your boy don't want to get demonetized. But anyways, we would then have Deku essentially just, chilling in the back up until it's said that he wants to go to UA High. And this is when Bakugo would basically throw an explosion at Deku's desk, as he would say, "Huh? You want to go to UA High?" As he would start laughing in Deku's face, telling him that that's such a joke. He says, "You better be joking, Deku, because if you're not, I'm definitely going to make you regret it. So you better take out that submission form, because I'm going to be the first one out of this crappy school to go there. And people will be telling stories about me." As we would then have Bakugo going on his tangent just like in canon, and Deku would have his notebook as it would get blown to pieces, as Deku would have that same reaction where he's like, "No, Bakugo, that's not at all what I meant." As we would then have Bakugo throw an explosion at Deku, but seeing as this version of Deku is actually a lot more durable, he would definitely be able to tank it with, less damage than, we would expect Deku to take. With that being said though, Deku would then go outside and take the same path that he did in the original canon. And this is when, he would basically be walking down the tunnel as a sludge villain would appear out of nowhere and say, "Give me your body, kid." And as soon as that happens, Deku's hair stand up as he would say, "No, no, 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 no. This can't be happening," as he begins to start running away from the sludge villain. And right as the sludge villain's about to jump on him, Deku would proceed to basically freeze up, and he would fall unconscious as the sludge villain would smile and say, "Perfect." As he would then lunge on Deku, as Deku under his breath would say, "Thunderclap and slash." And we would have Deku essentially blitzing behind the sludge villain, as the sludge villain couldn't see Deku even move, as Deku would proceed to basically go straight that way and just avoid the sludge villain. As this is when, the sludge villain would begin to look around for Deku, saying, "Where did that kid go?" As we would then have Deku being very far away from the sludge villain, as at this point, Deku has definitely woken up, and he realizes that he got away from there, so he would run away, and this is when All Might would appear out of nowhere, throwing a Detroit Smash at the villain, as the villain would be flown into smithereens, and All Might would never end up finding Izuku, meaning that Mirio would end up being the successor to One For All, just like it should have been in the original canon. With that being said though, Deku has the remainder of the 10 months to essentially work on the Thunder Breath, as his grandfather would actually spend these next 10 months basically teaching him, the form and teaching him more of the basics. As at this point, we're just going to say that Deku is about as strong as Zenitsu is when Tanjiro first meets him. And that's essentially how Deku is going to be, as, this is essentially how things are going to be going. Now, he would spend the 10 months basically doing the same training that, Zenitsu did, except there's going to be one major difference. By this point, Deku's actually able to use the Thunderclap and Flash one time out of the day without him having to be unconscious or anything, or even build up his fears. But for him to actually be able to do that, it would take a lot of him. He would have to have total concentration, and he would have to not have fear in his heart to be able to use it. So that's essentially what Deku would be working on during the 10 months. He'd be doing a lot of meditating and keeping calm of his heart, as well as trying to get rid of his fears. So for this 10 months, his grandfather would essentially expose him to all of his fears, such as rejection, spiders, roaches, people, villains, and stuff like that. And that's essentially what Deku's training will consist of. By the end of things, Deku would basically thank his grandfather, as in a week from now, he's actually going to have the UA entrance exam. And this is when we would then have, his grandfather say, "Zenitsu, come here." As we would then have Deku walk up there, and you guys may be wondering, why is he calling Deku Zenitsu? And there's a very simple, very, cool explanation of this. Deku's grandfather ended up giving him the nickname Zenitsu for plot reasons, I guess. I don't really have a real legitimate reason as to why I did this. I just kind of wanted to do it, not gonna lie. Anyways, that aside, this is when Deku would proceed to basically thank his grandfather, as they would basically have a bit of a meal, reminiscent to the same way that Tanjiro had his final meal with his master after he had basically learned the fundamentals of the water breathing style. This is when we would then have Deku essentially taking a train back home, as, his grandfather's house and his is about a 3-hour, train ride from point A to point B, as he would arrive to his house, and he would then spend the next couple of days resting, as we're now basically just going to skip to the day where Deku essentially has the entrance exam. Deku would be getting himself ready and psyched up, as he would essentially be wearing, the cloak that Zenitsu wears. His grandfather actually ended up passing it down, and that's essentially what Deku's gonna have as his hero suit, but seeing as he wants to take it now, he would basically end up doing that. He would also put in a form basically letting him have the ability to take a sword in for the exam. Seeing as he's quirkless, they ended up allowing it, and Deku would end up going to the exam basically having the same outfit that Zenitsu does, except not any of the rest of the gear. He would kind of just have the robe on him with a shirt and some pants and, some really cool, his red shoes, I guess we could say. Yeah, his red shoes. As we would then have Deku essentially just walking through there, as this is when Deku's basically just kind of psyching himself up, telling him, "I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can't do this." As he would start to turn around, and right as he does, he would end up bumping into a brunette-haired girl, as he would be pretty much face to face with her, as he would say, "Ah!" And this is when we would have Uraraka saying, "Hey, you okay?" As Deku would say, "Girl," as Uraraka would say, "Yeah, I'm a girl, but what about it?" As Deku would say, "Sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you." As Uraraka would proceed to look at Deku and tell him that it's okay, she doesn't mind. As Deku would look at her and say, "Oh, Well, my name's Izuku Midoriya. As she would say, the name's Ochakura Araka. Isn't it crazy how this test is going to decide what happens for the rest of our lives? As we would then have Deku and Araka having the same conversation as in canon, and well, that's essentially how this little situation would go. Deku would end up talking to her a little longer, and this time Deku would actually end up mustering the courage to talk to her, instead of, our original Izuku Midoriya, seeing as he has a tiny bit more confidence than the original one. Anyways, we would then have Deku essentially just going inside the test, and he would sit next to Bakugo. As Bakugo would glare at Deku, telling him that he can't believe he even showed his face out here, as he would say that it doesn't matter anyway, seeing as he's gonna fail regardless. As Deku would look at Bakugo and he would basically stare at him, as Bakugo would look at him and Deku would say, it was nothing. As we would then have Deku pretty much just acing the test, seeing as our boy Deku is extremely intelligent. Anyways, this is when Deku would proceed to essentially go outside to where the robot portion of the exam is going to happen. As this is when Deku would proceed to basically just be sitting there. Oh, and also I forgot to mention, Ida ended up still doing his thing to Deku, seeing as this version of Deku is pretty reminiscent to the one that we have in canon. This is a lot different than most of my series, seeing as most of my Dekus are pretty cool and, pretty BADASS. I don't know if I can even say that without getting, pretty much demonetized. So anyways, Deku would proceed to be a lot different than my usual Dekus. Most of mine are pretty cool and they're extremely OP by this point, but this one, a lot different, and I'm actually enjoying this a lot. It's a little bit of a different cup of tea. Anyways, this is when Deku would essentially be outside, as he would see that blue-haired boy coming out of nowhere. But as he sees him, he would then see the girl with the brunette hair come outside. As he would go up to walk up to her, but before he can even do anything, we would then have Ida essentially just walking up to Deku, as he would say, hey, put his hands on his shoulders and tell Deku not to go disrupt her concentration. As we would then have Deku saying that he wasn't going to, as Ida would just put his hand in front of Deku, and Deku would just ultimately have to accept it. As he would stay by the back, and Ida would then basically just be like, as we would then have Deku essentially just staying there. As this is when the exam would start. And as soon as the exam would start, Deku would go in there, what's it called, using his normal things, as he would use his normal techniques, and he would then end up using his thunderclap and slash to essentially take out about 3 robots that were in a straight line. As we would have Deku getting, let's say, 5 points from that. He would get 5 points from 3 robots, all ranging in point values. Anyways, we would then have Deku essentially just, it was a 3-pointer and 2 2-pointers. Yeah, that makes 3-pointer and 2 2-pointers. No, wait, I said 5. It was a 3-pointer and 2 1-pointers. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Anyways, we would then have Deku essentially going by, taking down very small point robots with a sword, seeing as he was extremely terrified at first, but after, taking down the first 3, he was able to, swallow it down, and he would basically finally be able to go down there and take out a couple of robots. By this point, he would barely start getting the hang of things, and Deku would essentially have about 13 points. He would have 13 robot points. And at this point, we would be more than halfway into the exam, as this is the point when the 0-pointers would come in. And this is when we would have the giant robot coming out of nowhere, as we would then have Deku essentially, be seen by the rest of his classmates as, not classmates, but test takers, as they would all run away, and we would have Ida rushing by Deku, as Ida would have actually seen as Deku used the thunderclap and slash, and he would have seen how fast he was. He would think that this kid is even faster than me, but he doesn't mind the fact, since, speed won't help him take down that behemoth of a robot. As we would then have Deku essentially looking towards that thing, as he would fall into the ground saying, oh, that thing is huge. Why would they allow something like this in this exam? What is going on? As we would then have, pretty much him looking around, as we would then see Raraka under some rubble, as he would look towards her and he would say, oh no, it's that girl from earlier. And we would then have Deku essentially looking towards her direction, as he would proceed to basically have his mouth have that same reaction that Deku did in canon, where he's terrified out of his mind, but he knows that he has to move. As Deku would essentially pass out unconscious, and Deku would basically just be there laying down on the ground, as the robot would start to get closer to Araka, and right as the robot was actually about to step on her, this is when something inside of Izuku would snap. He would speed blitz and grab Uraraka before the robot could do anything to her, as he would put her down, and this is when Deku would say, thunderclap and slash, Godspeed, as he would blitz at the robot, and he would slash its legs clean, as the robot would fall backwards, and it would drop down, crushing about 10 buildings in its area of impact, as we would then have Izuku basically dropping to the ground completely unconscious. As Uraraka would actually turn Izuku weightless, and she would actually end up taking him to Recovery Girl, where Izuku would actually wake up 30 minutes later with Uraraka on top of him saying, "You okay?" As Deku would say, "Where am I?" And she would say, "You passed out after saving me back there. Thank you." As Deku would say, "Oh, I saved you?" As she would say, "You did, don't you remember?" And Deku would say, "No, but what are you?" As he would then start gaining his consciousness, and he would say, "A girl!" As, he would then go back to his normal status. He would say, "You waited for me?" And she would say, "Yeah, I figured if you saved me, I would, help you out a bit." As he would start crying, and he would say, "Thank you so much." Just a normal Zenitsu reaction. As we would then have Uraraka being like, "What's going on?" But she would think it's kind of cute. As we would have Recovery Girl walk in, and she'd be like, "Okay, kid, get up. You gotta go. You seem to be fine now. Go home now." As Deku and Uraraka from there would essentially walk home, and Deku would tell Uraraka bye. As he would basically walk off, and he would say, "I hope you got into UA." As she would say, "You too, Izuku." As she would say, "I hope we're in the same class, maybe." As they would go off their separate ways, and we would then have Izuku essentially receiving the letter from UA, or Deku, I guess you could say. Ugh. Oh god. That was one of those hiccup burps. Oh, that was not okay. Anyways, I don't know why I even said that. Anyways, we would then have Deku getting his letter, and he would end up getting accepted, to which we will now essentially fast forward to the first day of class. As Deku would essentially go up there, and this is when he would open the doors. He would see Ida and Bakugo arguing at the front. As he would see that, and he would say, "Well, I guess I got stuck with Bakugo." As, he would then look around, hoping to find the brown-haired girl. Had to get a sip of water. Anyways, we would see Deku seeing no sight of her. As he would then, kind of look down a little bit. As Bakugo would look at Izuku and say, "Hey, how did you get in here?" As he would stop arguing with Ida. And Ida would walk up to him as he would say, "You are a superior student to me. I saw what you can do, and I deeply apologize for the way that I treated you." As Deku would say, "What?" And, this is when Bakugo would get up and say, "I don't know how you cheated to get in here, but no matter what it is you did, you're going to be weeded out sooner or later." As he would then say, "Huh." And this is when Uraraka would walk up behind Deku and say, "Hey, I recognize that hair." As she would see Deku, and she would basically look at him, and she would begin to conversate with him. And this is when Deku would proceed to essentially look at her, as she would say, "Oh my god, I was looking for you right now." And she would say, "Really? I actually started looking for you as soon as I walked in too." As we would have Aizawa get up, as he would say, "If you're here to make friends, I suggest you leave now." Doing his usual shtick, as they would all go to the changing room. And this is when, we would actually not have Deku being told that he has a great body. He would essentially be built like Zenitsu, and seeing as Zenitsu has extremely powerful legs, but not exactly the strongest upper body, Deku wouldn't really be he wouldn't be impressing anybody like crazy. As, this is when we would have Deku, go up there, as he would actually be told that he ended up getting first place, as with the accumulation of taking down the 0-pointer, saving Uraraka in the proper way this time, as well as gaining the couple of robot points that he ended up getting, he would have actually ended up having the number 1 points score. As Bakugo would say, "What? How did that nerd get the top points? That should have been me." As we would then have Aizawa telling him to stand down, and if he has another one of those little outbursts, he's gonna make sure he gets expelled from UA. As we would then have Bakugo saying, "Whatever." As we would then have Deku essentially going up to the thing, as Aizawa would tell him to use his quirk to throw it as far as he can. And Deku would throw the ball as hard as he physically can, not getting a particularly really impressive score. He would get double what he got in the original. Nothing, superhuman, but something that's, pretty average. He would get about, let's say, 40 more points than Bakugo does with his normal throw. Not his, supercharged with his explosion, but his normal throw. As we would then have Deku essentially just going to the back of the line thinking, how am I going to pass? I don't even have a quirk. As everybody in the class would, Ida would stare at him and wonder why he didn't use that amazing power of his. As he would walk up to Deku and say, hey, why didn't you use your little cool speed? As Deku would say that it's not a quirk and that he doesn't know how to use it at will. As Ida would say, what do you mean it's not a quirk? As Deku would say, it's not a quirk, as I said. And they would begin to talk about things a little bit, and Deku would proceed to basically talk to him a little bit, as we would then have the rest of the exams basically going on. And this is when we're actually going to have one major change. The final event is actually going to be the race. Yes, the race. Anyways, we would then have Deku going through the next couple of events, getting, actually decent scores, getting a lot better than his, normal counterpart, but nothing exactly super impressive or nothing that's going to make him, be all that crazy. Anyways, we would then have Deku essentially being at the last thing, which is essentially the race, as Deku can see what his scores are and that everybody got these super impressive scores, and that if he doesn't perform, he's going to fail, and he's going to be expelled from the school that he worked so hard to get into. As Deku would, concentrate, calming his mind, soul, and body. As he would proceed to breathe in and out, saying thunder breath. As he would basically, hold a position to make it look like he's holding his sword. As he would say, thunder breath, clap and flash. As he would, is it called the clap and flash? The thunder clap and flash. Sorry, the thunder clap and flash. As he would say first form, thunder clap and flash. As he would blitz over to, the other side of the race. As he would have blitzed it in even under Ida's reciprocal burst score. He would have gotten an incredible amount, a number that even All Might would have struggled to get. As this version of All Might definitely couldn't keep up with this version of Deku when he's fully concentrated. He would have used Godspeed along with, the normal first form, as afterwards, Deku would essentially, barely be standing, as Aizawa would look at Deku and see that this kid actually isn't worthless after all. As he would proceed to tell the rest of the class that nobody's going to get expelled, and that it was just a tactic to make them all basically try harder. As Momo, being, who she is, she would say, what? You guys didn't know? This is like a canon. And this is when Kaminari would basically walk up to Deku saying, whoa, dude, that was awesome. As we would then have Deku looking at Kaminari, as he would say, you really think so? As he would say, totally, dude, what's your quirk? You have a super speed quirk or something? As Deku just basically would say, it's not a quirk. As Mineta would jump into the way and say, yeah, that was awesome. As we would then have Deku, and I'm sure you guys know where I'm going with this, it's going to be the trio, the greatest squad of all time. Kaminari, Mineta, and Deku, the three pervert musketeers. And this would be the beginning to a beautiful friendship, which would lead us to having a lot of funny moments down the series. With that being said, I hope you guys are excited for that. But anyways, we would then have Deku pretty much be approached by Araka, as she would say, you're so fast. What's your quirk? As Deku would say, he's quirkless for the 50th time, and they would proceed to not believe him. As we would then have Deku, Kaminari, Ida, Uraraka, and himself, Mineta, basically walking out talking amongst each others, as we would then have a basic skip to the day of where we're basically going to be having the Heroes vs. Villains event. Deku at this point would have established a pretty cool relationship with Kaminari, Mineta, Uraraka, as well as Ida, and that's essentially going to be Deku's friend group, but who he hangs out with the most and finds the most in common with would definitely be Kaminari and Mineta, seeing as they're all a little bit perverted, I guess you could say. Anyways, not Deku in the sense of he's like that, but Deku's just kind of a little bit obsessive. Anyways, we would then have Deku essentially going by the normal day just like he would, eating, food, and basically talking about why he wants to become a hero. Deku would say that he wants to honor his grandpa, and he also wants to become somebody who can save everybody with a smile. He wants to be somebody just like All Might. As this is when we would basically have the last class, and All Might would appear out of nowhere. As Deku would say, whoa, All Might! And the rest of the class would have the same reaction. As we would then have everybody actually be impressed, seeing as nobody here in this class has actually ever met All Might before this, as we would have All Might telling them that the clothes make the pros and to go get suited up. As this is when we would have Deku essentially going over to, the dressing area, as what Deku's costume is going to be is essentially what you guys see in the thumbnail. And if you guys want a little more, you know, of how it would look, it's essentially just Zenitsu My Hero Academia style. Just that really cool cloak that he wears. And that's pretty much what Deku's costume would be. Anyways, with that being said, let's just skip on over to when the teams are called. Obviously, all of the teams are going to remain as they do in canon, with Deku and Araka. As Deku would be, you know, placed with Araka, he would basically start, you know, smiling, thinking that this is going to be awesome. As Mineta and Kaminari would say that we're so jealous, until Mineta basically gets placed with Momo, and Kaminari would say, oh man, you guys got so lucky. As, you know, we would have, you know, what's it called, Kaminari and Jiro, and he would say, I got a little lucky myself. As we would then have, you know, Deku and, you know, Mineta basically be like, yeah, we all got lucky. As Deku would basically be talking to Araka, as he would actually not be paying any attention to Bakugo. And seeing as there's a girl on his team, a couple of things are gonna be changing. Anyways, as soon as the battle would start, we would have Deku and Araka basically going in there, and seeing as Deku doesn't want to make himself look like a fool in front of a girl, as soon as Bakugo would arrive, and he would say, Deku! We would then have, you know, Deku looking towards Bakugo, as he would say, don't interrupt me! As he would say, thunderclap and slash! As he would go up and blitz Bakugo, as he would cut him across the chest, leaving an X as Bakugo would fall down to the ground, and he would have been taken down swiftly by that. As Deku would have not even realized what he had just done, honestly. He did that on a whim without even realizing what he did. And this is when Araka and Deku would be walking by. She would say, Izuku, as he would keep talking, and she would say, Izuku, as Deku would say, yeah? And she would say, look at what you did. As she would say, as Deku would say, what? What did I do? As she would say, look! As she would say, you took down Bakugo. As he would say, I did that? And she would say, yes, you did that. As Deku would say, I did it. Okay, I am having so much fun with the series. I'm in love, honestly. Anyways, with that being said, we will then have Deku essentially going by to the bond room with Uraraka. As we then have Deku and Uraraka going in there, and as soon as the battle with Ida starts, this would be a lot more tough than you would expect. Seeing as Deku actually isn't talking to Uraraka right now and isn't in the zone of wanting to impress her or not knowing what he's doing with himself, would essentially try to fight Ida with nothing but his normal sword, but he wouldn't exactly be able to do it. It would be pretty tough for him. I mean, he doesn't have a quirk after all, and when he does use the thunderclap, it's usually on a whim. With that being said, Uraraka and him would proceed to try to get Ida, but Ida would proceed to pretty much beat them both until Deku would basically be pushed to the brink where he would activate the thunderclap and flash as he would take Ida. Oh no, actually he would activate the thunderclap and flash and blitz over to the bomb as he would touch it, and the hero team would be announced the winners as Bakugo would be taking a recovery girl quickly as he would have two, you know, pretty deep slashes in his chest as she would definitely have to heal that, and that would leave a mark on Bakugo that's going to be permanent. Anyways, with that being said, after class, Bakugo would be silent the entire time. As, you know, by the end of the school, Deku would go up to Bakugo telling him he's sorry for leaving him like that permanently. As Bakugo would tell him he can't believe he lost to somebody like him, a quirkless wannabe. It'll never happen again. And he'll be, I don't know if I could say that word without getting demonetized. He'll be Damned. I don't know if I spelled that right, but you guys know what I mean. He'll be damned. Anyways, we would then have, you know, Deku basically standing there thinking, yeah, I just started a war that I don't know if I'm too good with having started. As, you know, this is when Deku would proceed to essentially just chill for the next couple of days, just being with his buddies, Mineta, Kaminari, and they would basically be with Araka, Jiro, but Mineta sadly wouldn't end up acquiring the thing with Momo. She would of course be falling all over Todoroki, and well, you know, normal things would be normal. Anyways, this is when we're now just gonna skip on over to the day of the USJ, as I mean, I could go over this stuff and have some funny things happen, but it would, yeah, I kind of want to get to the USJ. There's something that I really want to cover there. Anyways, the entire trip there would pretty much go like canon, except Deku would be hanging out with his new group of friends, and 13 would give her lame speech, Kurogiri would appear and teleport everybody, and as soon as the villains are there, Deku would say, "Villains! Villains!" He would react just like Mineta would, and when they get teleported over to the boat, when Deku and Mineta see what's going on, they would both have the same, meltdown, as we would have Tsuyu basically asking them both why they're freaking out so much. I mean, they need to be calm in this type of situation, right? As we would then have Deku and Mineta looking at each other, they're saying, it's villains! What do you want me to do? Sorry if I'm ear raping you guys, but yeah, I can't help it. But anyways, we would have Deku and, well, as I said, Mineta pretty much just going through the normal things, and yeah. Anywho, we would then have, let's see. We would then have them basically standing there looking over the boat, seeing what had happened. As, this is when we would pretty much just have Deku and Mineta freaking out. As Tsuyu would say, I have to do everything myself, I guess. As she would proceed to basically snap some sense into both of them, telling them that they need to figure something out or else they're going to be pretty much screwed. As we would then have Deku and Mineta looking at each other saying, no, I'm too young. As we would then have them both looking at each other. And this is when Tsuyu would basically say that, well, they need a plan. As Deku would basically freak out. And this is when a couple of the villains would proceed to start getting on board. As we would have Deku and Mineta freaking out. As Mineta would start throwing his balls all over the place, just trying to keep these villains away. And Tsuyu would jump away as far as she can. As we would then have Deku right at the front lines. As the villain would smile, taking out a water weapon from his hands. And he would turn his hands into water weapons, and that's all his quirk is. He can turn his hands, only his hands, into weapons of water. As we would have Deku essentially looking at him thinking that, yeah, he's not making it out alive. As he would proceed to basically be terrified, and in the last moment he would use the thunder breathing first form, thunderclap and flash, as he would strike down the villain. And as he does that, he would pretty much, unconsciously have done that. And as soon as he, awakes from that, he would actually not pass out or feel that heavy of a stamina drain this time. Did you guys hear that weird noise? It was like a weird honking noise. Anyway. Do you guys hear that? Oh no, guys, my family got home. This means that if you guys end up hearing any little background noise, you're screaming, just guys, do understand, my family just arrived. I was actually previously recording like the portions up to this point with them pretty much just being gone, but we can still keep recording, seeing as I'm having a blast doing this, and I'm pretty sure you guys are having a blast listening to this series, so why stop just because of that? Anyways, to keep this story going, this is when Deku and Mineta would look at each other as they would think that they might have a strategy. As this is when Deku would say that if he can pull this off, he might be able to get them over to the land. As he would then tell Mineta that what they're going to be doing might be a little crazy. As Mineta would look at him and say, what are we going to be doing, Midoriya? As this is when Deku would essentially look at, we would have Deku essentially looking at Mineta, as this is when we would have Deku pretty much just... They're already starting to be loud. Anyways, as we would then have Deku pretty much... Bruh. This is going to be stressful. Anyways, we would then have Deku pretty much just running around as he... No, not running around, but basically trying to calm himself. As he would have ended up telling Tsuyu and Mineta to grab a hold of him. As he would tell Mineta that he's going to try to use his thunderclap and flash technique to get them over to the land. It's a crazy idea, but if it works, it might just save their lives. As this is when Deku would proceed to breathe, and he would proceed to concentrate his mind and body as he would say, thunderclap and flash, as he would blitz over to the land. And with the pressure of him running on the water, we would then have Deku essentially, and I know some of you guys may be like, yo, Zenitsu, I don't want to hear how fast Zenitsu is. He cannot do that. Plot, come on, just give me this one thing. Anyways, we would then have Deku and Mineta and Tsuyu on land, and the same encounter with basically Shigaraki would happen, where they're basically just looking from afar. as soon as Tsuyu was about to get decayed by Shigaraki, Deku would have actually done something that I don't think many of you guys would have actually expected. Deku would have, in the moment of hesitation, would have ended up grabbing his sword as he literally cuts off one of Shigaraki's arms. No, one of Shigaraki's hands, his left hand, and Shigaraki's hand would go off flying. The blood would start spewing out, and this is when Shigaraki would say, Nomu, get the brat. As we would then have Deku basically getting rushed at by the Nomu. As we would then have Deku be punched away, flinging out of there. As Deku would, basically start coughing a lot of blood out. As we would then have the Nomu running at him. And this is when Shigaraki would say that they got to get out of here, that he needs to get treated. As Kurogiri would say, what about the Nomu? And he would say, just leave the Nomu. He would say, it doesn't matter. All I needed for that Nomu to get that brat. As he would basically be teleported away by Kurogiri. And this is when Deku would be having to be forced to fight the Nomu. As the Nomu would pretty much just be beating on Izuku, essentially. As Izuku would dodge barely into the blows. But seeing as he's pretty durable after all these years of pretty much being, trained in that, he would be able to take almost most of them, but some of these blows would have ended up hurting him really badly. At this point, we would then have Deku basically falling out into unconsciousness, as we would then have Deku basically just starting to lose some of his breath, as he would basically think that he's gonna die. He would think that everything's gonna end here, and in that moment he would have the same thing that happened to Zenitsu against the spider little demon thing from the Demon Slayer thing, essentially happening to Deku, where he pretty much says, first form, Godspeed, first form, thunderclap, and flash! As he would slice off the Nomu's head, immediately shocking Mr. Aizawa, as he would have seen as this kid was able to do that. But not too long ago, he was pretty much peeing his pants at the thought of having to face somebody like Bakugo. This is insane. This kid is so powerful. How does he not know of how strong he is? As we would then have Deku basically passing out completely after that. Waking up after the cleanup of the USJ happened and after All Might actually arrived. As All Might actually was there to witness as Deku would have actually sliced off the Nomu's head. And we would have then had a moment where Aizawa would basically tell All Might that that kid may just grow up to be even stronger than him. As Deku would proceed to be staying unconscious, and we would then have Deku essentially just going through the motions for the 1 week break that we essentially have. Hold on, give me a second. As I was saying, sorry that I keep going. But anyways, Deku would proceed to essentially just honestly take a break during this 1 week. Instead of pretty much developing some crazy move like the god, what's called the 7th flaming form of stuff like that Zenitsu ended up getting in the anime, or no, not the anime, but the manga. Instead of training, Deku would take these days off. He would actually end up hanging out with Kaminari and Mineta, and they would read a lot of comic books and mangas together, if you catch my drift. Anyways, that's essentially what Deku would spend the 1 week doing. There'd really be nothing eventful happening at this moment, and this is essentially how things would pretty much stay. This is how this little situation would go for, how things are going to be playing out. But with that being said, we would then have, them going back to school, as Aizawa would proceed to actually tell the students that, well, they're going to be having the UA Sports Festival and that they're going to have 2 days to get ready for it. As the Bakugo situation would still happen, and seeing as Deku was actually the one to win at the, the robot or the UA entrance exam, he would actually be tasked with giving the speech. As when Deku goes up there, he would be having major stage fright, as he wouldn't be able to mutter a single word. And this is when, Deku would begin to remember his grandfather, as he would proceed to take one breath in and proceeds to give a pretty amazing speech, actually having people stand up out of their seats, starting to clap for Deku, basically saying that it was amazing. As that's essentially how that ends up going down. And we would then have Deku proceeding to go on to the race, which this is going to be fun. As soon as the race starts, before the race even has a chance to even start, Deku would breathe and say, thunderclap and flash, as he would blitz on over to the finish line in one fell swipe, dodging completely Todoroki's ice and getting first place before in front of everybody's eyes. As you know, Deku's grandpa would definitely be watching this, and he would be so proud of his grandson, seeing as he's come this far. He was able to do this on his own. Not even a month ago was he able to do this type of stuff, and he would be proud to call him his grandson. As he would be thinking back to the days where Deku was not even sure if he could even do things such as climbing a tree, and now he's getting first place in the UA Sports Festival. He couldn't be any more proud. And well, this is when we would have Deku essentially just being first place, as this is when Deku would have the realization that he probably shouldn't have won that. As we would then have Deku essentially getting the same team as in canon and getting the same fright that our original Deku did. With the team pretty much being the original canon with Mei Hatsume, Tokiyami, and Uraraka. Actually, no. We're actually going to change things. The team would consist of Mineta, Kaminari, and Uraraka. None of this Mei Hatsume. And what does this mean for Deku's team? It means that Bakugo and Todoroki would end up snatching that headband real quick. Seeing as Deku's at the top, he can't exactly use his little slash attacks or anything like that. So that would be very hard for him to do. They would try to fight it off with Tokiyami and Kaminari doing their best, but it wouldn't be that good of a... oh wait, no, Tokiyami's not in here. But, you know, Mineta and, you know, Kaminari basically trying to dodge it off, but they really wouldn't be able to do it, seeing as, you know, Kaminari is just an attack that basically hits other people as well. As if he tried it, he would end up hurting his team as well. And so they end up getting their headband stolen. A major difference than it happened in canon. And instead of, you know, Tokiyami ended up actually grabbing the headband from anybody else, we would then actually have Deku essentially getting the headband from just proceeding to get headbands from the other teams, doing what Shinso's team did, going after the much weaker teams to pretty much ensure their victory. As Kaminari would have said if they wouldn't go after them, but Mineta would have said they're crazy, as he and Deku would have agreed that they should, instead of doing that, go after other easier people and steal their headbands instead. As that's what they would do to just barely be able to get last place and make it into the first battles. And in terms of how these battles go, I'm just gonna say it now, Deku loses. The first battle against Shinso, Deku just it's not okay. This time when Deku, you know, talks back to Shinso, there's no plot armor to defend him. No all for one, no one for all. Actually, sorry, not all for one, but one for all to defend him against, you know, well, the strike of Shinso or his quirk. Instead of having what happened in canon, Shinso would basically tell Deku that that once he's done with him, he's gonna, you know, destroy that little girlfriend of his. As Deku would get angry and say, "You're not gonna do," as he would be taken off. His control over his body and mind would be gone, and he would end up being forced to walk off the stage. As in terms of who ends up winning, we would have Todoroki winning. See, I know in the original, Todoroki ended up, you know, losing to Bakugo, but that was only because Todoroki was thinking about what Deku said. I think that even if Todoroki could only use his eyes, he still would have had the ability to beat Bakugo at this current point in time, seeing as he doesn't have any of his cool moves, and Bakugo's, well, is the same as he would be in this version. So I think Todoroki would get first, with Bakugo coming in second, and Bakugo not accepting it, but pretty much just saying that he's going to win next time. And well, that's essentially how the UA Sports Festival would end up playing out. Now, we're going to end up going over them going back to class, as, you know, Aizawa would actually pretty much hand Deku his sheet, which essentially tells Deku who ended up putting in a request for him. As something crazy ends up happening. Mirko would have actually ended up putting a request for Deku, seeing how strong Deku's legs are. She definitely would have done it. And as soon as Deku sees Mirko's name, he would instantly want to go. Almost for the same reason as Mineta, but a little less, seeing as he kind of has a girl-ish. Seeing as he is with Uraraka. Kinda. Not really. It's not official, but they're in a weird, you know, they're in some elementary type thing where Uraraka has a crush on Deku, but she doesn't quite know it yet because she's never had a crush before. And Deku likes her, but it's kind of on some going across the playground saying hi and then be like, and then running away type stuff. So that's essentially how that little situation would play out. Now, in terms of the rest of the things for what happens, Deku would end up picking his name, which his grandfather actually ended up nicknaming him, and he would pick the thunder breathing hero Zenitsu, as that's essentially what Deku would pick in terms of his hero name. And in terms of what the internship experience would be, it would be a lot different than you would expect. In terms of Ida, sadly, there would be nobody there to protect him when Stain actually gets to him, meaning Stain would end up taking down the villains. And since Shigaraki was never actually there because his hand was kind of cut off, there would actually be no Hosu City incident, meaning that Ida would end up passing, sadly, due to nobody being there to help him. And Bakugo would still end up going with Best Genius, with all the other internships going the same. Except Deku's would go a lot different, seeing as we would actually get to meet the whatever number hero Mirko is, as, you know, his internship. As he would go over there, and Mirko would essentially proceed to pretty much tell Deku that what they're going to be training on is fighting. As Mirko, in this version of events, instead of Deku getting some weird upgrade or anything, he's essentially going to be fighting Mirko, somebody who's a lot different than his grandpa and doesn't actually give Deku as much time to understand things. As what Deku actually ends up getting from Mirko is that Gran Torino treatment. She would beat on this man for the entirety of the thing, telling him that she knows he has some potential in him, but he just needs to learn how to use it at all times. As after this internship, Deku would finally be able to do it. He would be able to use his first form, Thunderclap and Slash, on command, and he would actually be able to use 10 slashes of it, as well as one use of Godspeed, a quick 10-second burst of unparalleled speed, just in the same way that Zenitsu did when he was fighting the spider thing, except as I said, it's going to be a quick burst of 10 seconds, which gives him, you know, speed that, you know, surpasses even All Might's. But with that being said, we would then proceed to have Deku going back, as the internship definitely taught him a lot, and when he would return, he would end up finding out the sad news about Ida. Actually, let's take that back. I'm not going to have Ida die. I always have him die for some reason, and instead of that, we're actually going to have a little bit of a change happening. Instead of Ida actually dying in this version, we're actually going to have it to where Ida actually was just crippled by Stain, because he ended up stabbing his back, and he ended up removing Ida's abilities to walk. So instead of having him die, we would have the class visit Ida after Ida tells them what happened, and Ida would be crying in bed saying he just wanted to avenge his brother. And everybody would understand, but they would all pretty much come to the same conclusion, which is essentially that he should have never been vengeance driven, and that he should have had more of a meaning towards why he wanted to take down the hero killer. Maybe if he would have saved the other hero there, maybe Stain would have let him go. But with that being said, we would then have them all taking part in the race, and in terms of who wins, guess who wins? Mr. Speedy Speed would end up winning. We would have Deku essentially using the Thunderclap and Flash in two sessions. He would say, Thunderclap, Flash, as he would blitz on over halfway to where All Might is. And we would proceed to have him slash and create a straight path, straight to where All Might's at, basically winning in terms of the race. But with that being said, we would then have them all basically being told about the final exams and how they're actually going to be having to study a lot, as they're basically let go free. And in terms of what Deku does during this time, we're finally going to have our first little thing with Deku and Uraraka happening, where it's a little bit of an established thing. Uraraka, during the 1 week that they had studying, would have actually ended up asking Deku if he wanted to come over and help study with her, as that's essentially what they would do. And by the end of, by the end of the 5th day, we would have Deku hold on, give me a second. we would now have Deku essentially being asked by Uraraka if he actually wants to go get a bite to eat, as Uraraka would pretty much be the man of the relationship, I guess you could say, as she would be the one who actually ended up inviting Deku, and after that, Deku would say, no, do you want to go get a bite to eat? As Uraraka would have said yes, and they would have ended up going to, you know, some small burger joint that, you know, Deku can afford. With that being said, they would end up pretty much talking to each other and developing a little bit more, where Uraraka would realize that she definitely has feelings for Deku, and Deku would end up telling Uraraka that he feels the same way. With that being said, this is when they would proceed to lean in, and before anything could happen, Kaminari and Mineta would come inside to the same place, as they would say, "Hey, Zuku," as they would say, "Oh," and they would proceed to look at Deku as they would say, "I see you," as Deku would say, "Guys, I was kind of busy," and they would proceed to say no more, man, we'll leave, don't worry about it. And Deku would proceed to basically continue with Uraraka where they had left off, but the kiss would never end up happening, sadly, seeing as that was interrupted in the perfect moment and went away. That being said, though, they would proceed to essentially just go and, you know, just take the finals. In terms of the written portion, Deku would do very well, just the same score that he got in canon. And in terms of the All Might and Bakugo thing, yeah, they're essentially on the same page as they were in the original. And it goes almost the same if it weren't for the fact that after Bakugo got ragdolled by All Might and beat on, when Deku tried to save, you know, Bakugo with the first Thunder Flash strike, he would have actually accidentally ended up slashing on All Might's, you know, side, not the side of his injury, but the other side, weakening him heavily as he's injured from both sides of his body now. But if he gets healed quickly enough by Recovery Girl, he'll definitely be, you know, healed. As Deku would basically use his Thunder Flash and Clap to basically try to get, you know, hit down All Might. As at one point, All Might would end up grabbing the sword and he would end up breaking half of it. As he would grab the sword after one of Deku's slashes after he caught on to what happened, and he would break it, punching it in half. As Deku would, you know, freak out and say, "What? He can do that?" As we would then have Deku essentially just, you know, pretty much just looking away. As we would have Deku, you know, thinking that he is, there's no hope. As Bakugo would stand up, beaten and battered, as he would say, "Stay out of my way, Deku." As he would, you know, try to fight, you know, with All Might. But during that time, that would have actually given Deku enough time to activate Godspeed. 10-second of temporary, you know, pretty much speed unparalleled. As in those 10 seconds, Deku would have grabbed Bakugo by his hero suit, and he would have thrown Bakugo out of the arena, as they would have ended up passing. And this is when they would all pretty much have a great time. In terms of, well, what we had in the original with the moth thing, that would not end up happening, seeing as in this version, instead of everybody ending up going, we would have Deku and Uraraka being the only exclusions, as they would actually be at Deku's house, and this is the day that Deku would actually end up introducing Uraraka to his mother Inko, as Inko would say, "Wow, I didn't know you had a little girlfriend. I see you, Izuku." As Deku would, you know, he'd say that he did it. As Inko would proceed to tell Uraraka funny stories of how Izuku was growing up and how he always tried to get a girl, and she can't believe he actually did it. She proceeded to tell Uraraka that at one point she believed he would end up staying single, as Uraraka would start laughing, and they would have a pretty good time, to say the least. That's pretty much what's going on in terms of that situation. And now we're actually going to end up going over to, let's see, the bus, as they would all pretty much be on their way to the, what are they on their way to? Right. Sorry. They would basically be on their way to the Force Training Arc, as this would go by a lot different. See, everything up to the point where they get thrown off the edge would pretty much go as you guys would expect it to go. They would be thrown off, and Deku would pretty much be freaking out, as he's like, "Well, why did they do that?" As, you know, whatever, Araku would have actually ended up touching herself and Deku, and they would have ended up, you know, falling down a bit slower, as we would have them both be fun, as Deku would thank Araka for what she did. And this is when they would proceed to go through the, you know, the mud monsters, as seeing as Deku only has 10 good flash slashes, they would have ended up being about 20 minutes later than they were in the original, seeing as Deku was more of a liability than a real help. So that's essentially what ended up happening there. And once they arrived, Deku would of course still get hit in the good old area by Koda, and he would still go down onto the ground as Uraraka would say, "No, my babies!" No, I'm joking, that would have never happened. But still, we would then have, the original things happen. Deku would be cooked for too by Mandalay, as well as the rest of the class, and we would then have the hot springs happening with Mineta, and Deku actually wouldn't try to stop him. Or actually, Deku would try to stop him. He would tell Mineta not to do it, but Mineta would say that walls are meant to be climbed. As Koda would stop him, Mineta would fall, and Deku would end up saving Koda with his thunderclap and flash, as he would end up blitzing over there, grabbing Koda and taking him to Mandalay, learning about what happened. And the very next day, this is when Deku would actually end up, trying to create a new technique, the 7th form. As they would have ended up telling him that he needs something new, as Al would have told him that he always relies on that only move, as Deku would realize that he does. And this is the first time that Deku ends up working on it. He's nowhere near learning it at all by this point, but he's making some progress at least. He's about 10% into what he knows, into what he thinks the move is essentially going to be. As we would then have Izuku pretty much just trying to train in his 7th form. Something that he's actually just trying to create in his own to impress his grandfather. And that's essentially the training that Deku does for, well, the day that he has. As by the end of everything, Deku would be extremely exhausted. Extremely. And when I say extremely, I mean extremely. He would have used all of his stamina to pretty much try to learn this move. And it would definitely be something that is extremely hard for Izuku, seeing as he's not exactly the most powerful, beast in his class. But, all that aside, we would then have Deku essentially just having the same thing that happens, as he would follow Koda and he would give Koda the curry. Except this time, when Koda tells him to go away, Deku would sit down next to Koda, telling him that he knows what happened, but that, Koda shouldn't hate heroes for it. It's not their parents' fault that they died. They died doing something heroic, saving people. And if it wasn't for their sacrifice, think of how many other families would have lost their lives. They did that knowing the consequences, and after hearing that, Koda would break down into tears, saying, "You don't know what you're talking about. You wouldn't know what it's like to grow up without a mom and a father." As I had to go again, there was a lot of noise. Yeah, you guys are definitely gonna kind of be annoyed by this. Anyways, yeah, that's when Muscular would appear out of nowhere. And in terms of how this event goes, I want you to guess how Deku ends up handling this boy. Yup, you guessed it. Thunder Clap Flash. Anyways, as soon as Muscular arrives, Deku as well as Koda would just be standing there, both pretty scared, seeing another villain, as Deku would be thinking, when are these guys gonna quit? As, he would proceed to look at Deku and he would say, "Haha, you're one of the kids that's on the list." As Muscular would look at Deku and say that he's one of the people that Shigaraki wants him to kill the most. As we would then have Muscular throwing a punch at Deku, and right at that moment, Deku would use the Thunderclap and Slash to basically grab Koda and get him out of there as quickly as he possibly can. As this is when we would then have Deku pretty much returning back, as he would say, "You want me? You got me." As Muscular would then smile, thinking that this is gonna be fun. And we would then have Deku essentially calming himself, as he would say, "Thunderclap," and when he would slash at Muscular, the blade would break. It would break on impact with Muscular's muscles, as they would be far too strong for Deku to cut through. As Deku would be wondering what's going on, and this is when Deku would be punched out of there. As, we would then have Deku essentially, be about to be killed by Muscular, as Muscular would stand over him and tell him that that attack was so pitiful. It did absolutely nothing to him. As he would proceed to stand over Deku, and he was about to throw a huge punch, as this is when Koda would shoot the water gun at him, and this is when Muscular would have realized who he was, as he would tell Koda that he's next after he kills this guy here. And in that moment of saying what he had just said, Deku would grab the hinge of the blade that he has with the tiny piece of the sword, as he would breathe in, and he would say, "Godspeed, first form, thunderclap and flash," as he would blitz Muscular with unparalleled speed, as he would cut Muscular's head clean off of his body, decapitating him just like he did to the villain in the weird demon house. As we would then have Deku essentially standing there, as Koda would just be having his mouth wide open, as he would say, "He's so strong." As we would then have Deku grabbing Koda, and he would then rush him to Aizawa. As in terms of what happens next, it would all essentially go as it would in canon. This version of Deku, of course, wouldn't be hurt, and Bakugo would still end up being taken away. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I kind of don't like covering this part, so I'm kind of gonna speed blitz through this next little portion. Not because I don't want to, but okay, actually it is because I don't want to, but don't blame me. I kind of don't like the part where Bakugo gets taken. It's so boring. It's such a whack buildup. But anyways, we would then have Deku essentially going through the forest, running into Shoji, or Dupli Arms, I guess you could say, as he would also run into Tokiyami. And as soon as he sees him, he would decide that the best way to handle this would be to get him close to, Todoroki and Bakugo, if they can find them, seeing as he now knows that Bakugo is one of the priorities. They would proceed to get there, and everything would go as it would in canon up until they would arrive at Uraraka's. When Uraraka would say, "Where's Bakugo?" As Deku would realize that Bakugo wasn't there with them, as he would look around and he would begin to understand what had happened. He must have been taken while they weren't paying attention. As Deku would look around and he would see Mr. Compress jumping off in the distance with the two orbs, as he would proceed to pretty much flash them in front of Deku's face, and Deku would proceed to look at him as he would say, "I have to stop him," as he would proceed to use the thunderclap and flash to try to catch up to Mr. Compress, but he only has 2 bursts left, and with 2 of them it won't be nearly enough to catch up to him. As Bakugo would be taken away, and the other 2 would end up still grabbing Tokiyami. As that's essentially how that little situation would play out, and we would then have Deku essentially just going out to find Bakugo just like he did in canon, with Momo, Tsuyu saying her little piece, except this time Kaminari and Mineta would actually end up tagging along, seeing as they're both really close friends of Deku. Uraraka, of course, I'm not sure if Uraraka even went in the original. I'm pretty sure it was just Uraraka wasn't there. Yeah, she wasn't. Anyways, the little situation with All Might and them saving him would go a lot smoother. Deku would be even faster than he was in canon, and Todoroki would still be able to create that ice thing that basically saves them and has them flying off. All Might would still end up fighting All For One, and he would still end up retiring as the #1 hero of Japan. As yes, folks, this is when we're now actually going to jump back into school, when all of them end up getting scolded, and after this, I'm pretty sure we have the provisional hero license. Let me make sure. I'm not too sure on what event is next, seeing as I told you guys, this is completely unfiltered, unscripted material, and I've had a lot of fun with this series. I'm coming up with things as I go, and everything that I say, I kind of just do it off of impulse. Oh yeah, the provisional hero license exam. I hate this part too, but I'm still gonna cover it, seeing as I don't want to make this too boring at the end. The end is where I have to deliver the most. Anyways, we would have them all arrive at the provisional hero license exam. As actually, I hate this arc. I'm sorry. I just can't bring myself to do it. This entire arc is so useless. I don't like it. I mean, the thing that I do like about it is meeting the new characters such as Cammy, Inasa, the guy with the weird meatball quirk, the little intelligent girl that used her intellect to pretty much catch Momo off guard. Yeah, that was actually pretty cool. Some of you guys may disagree, but I thought it was pretty cool. Anyways, with that being said, Deku would have used his thunderclap and flash to hit 3 people in the targets. Todoroki and Inasa, as well as Bakugo, would still end up failing. Except Deku would actually... Oh wait, no, Deku passes in canon. Yeah, Deku would end up passing just like he does in canon. And we're now actually just going to go back to class. As this is when, they would all be in class. And this is when they would actually be introduced to the big 3 of UA High School. As Mirio, Togata Mirio. We would then have Nejire walk in there, and we would then have Tagimaki or Sun Eater. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce his name for the life of me. Let me see. I'm pretty sure it's Oh yeah, I don't know his name. His name is Sun Eater. I'm just gonna refer to him as Sun Eater. Anyways, we would then have Mirio basically challenging all of the students in class just like he would in canon, as he would proceed to tell them all to do power, as he would take down the rest of the students. But once he arrives to Deku, it's a lot different. See, of course Mirio isn't using One For All right now, seeing as any of these students would be hospitalized if he was to use that far of an extent of his power. So Mirio wouldn't actually end up using any of that stuff. But as soon as he tries to hit Deku, Deku would actually use the Thunderclap Slash to end up slashing straight at Mirio's chest, creating a huge gash at it actually, as Mirio would actually have to phase through it before it could cut any deeper than when it already got to. As Mirio would go down into the ground, and he would end up using 30% of One For All. No, let's say, yeah, 30% of One For All. So he would punch Deku and say, "Power!" As, you know, just like in canon, he would then be interested in Deku, and he would actually ask Deku to internship with Tsunade. And what do you know it? Deku actually accepts this offer. Seeing as he is not actually the successor of One For All, Tsunade would not be giving Deku any of the troubles that he did in the original, meaning that Deku will not be having to go through, you know, the treatment that Night Eye gave Deku, where he told him that he wasn't fit to be the user, Mirio should have gotten it, and Deku would never have that revelation happen to him. As we would then have him basically have to get a stamp, and Tsunade would actually know that regardless of what he does and what he tries, Deku's going to get the stamp regardless, because it's, I mean, as much as you can know what's going to happen in the future, if you're not fast enough to stop it, you can't help it. So when Deku uses his Thunderclap Slash, he would not even use his sword, but he would just blitz over there. He would have ended up using it as a short, at this point, he would end up using it as less of a slash, but the Thunderclap speed mode, I guess you could say, as he would just blitz and, you know, use his ability to, instead of slash, just blitz over there and grab the stamp. As probably didn't even need that much explaining. Anyways, we would then have Deku essentially go out patrolling with Mirio, as they would run into Tsunade. And as soon as Deku gets his hands on Eri and she ends up hugging him, Deku would hold her tightly as he would sense the fear in her. And when Overhaul walks out, Deku would notice who this man is. As on sight, Deku would be terrified, as Mirio would then tell Deku to let her go. And Deku was about to do it, but he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't, you know, face himself if he was to let this girl go back to that hell that she was living in. As Deku would put Eri down and tell her to run. As soon as he does that, Overhaul would take off his gloves, and in that split second, Mirio would phase through the ground as he would blitz over to Overhaul and punch him straight in the face, discombobulating Overhaul. As this is when Deku would tell Mirio that this guy needs to be taken care of, as he would use the Thunderclap and Flash. And the first time that he tries it, he would almost accidentally hit Mirio. Seeing as they don't know how to fight in synchrony, they would both be getting in each other's way, and Mirio would end up stabbing one of the pillar things straight through one of Deku's legs, just like he did in the original fight. As Deku's speed would be hindered by a lot. And this is when Deku would whip out a move that he's actually been working on for the last couple of days. And yes, you guys all know what this is. He would have actually ended up using this move right after Mirio would have ended up landing a solid blow to Overhaul. As, you know, Overhaul would have used his ability to pretty much almost, you know, destroy Mirio's being, because Mirio for a split second almost, you know, hesitated with his hit, and, you know, in that moment Shisaki was going to hit him, but before he could, Mirio would end up, you know, phasing through him. And in that split second, Deku would say, "Seventh form, Flaming Thunder God," as he would blitz at Overhaul, and he would proceed to slash his head clean off, as Overhaul's head would fly into the air, and Eri would basically come back to see what had just happened, as she would see as Deku just decapitated the man who made her life a living hell, as she would basically like just have fear and not know how to react at the same time. As Deku would then, you know, pretty much just look at Mirio, as Mirio would say that it had to be done. As they would then proceed to go back to Tsunade's agency, and they would basically be told what they were told in the original, with, you know, the normal stuff happening. Anyways, this is when we would then have, well, we would then have the little, let's see. let's see what would happen here. Yeah, we would then have the little portion where, well, what's it called? Deku pretty much just gets taken in. He gets in for questioning as to why he did it. He gets scolded. His provisional hero license actually taken away for 3 months for killing a villain. Seeing as heroes aren't actually supposed to do that. And, he would end up, being taken out from UA for 2 weeks on a suspension. But he would definitely be back by the time of the school festival, which, we would feature the gentle criminal. But instead of Deku actually forgetting his stuff, he would actually have it with him. And when Gentle actually appears, they would actually play it off as Gentle being part of the thing. So, UA wouldn't be, ostracized for what happened. As, the pro heroes would end up stopping Gentle before anything could even start. And this is actually where the story is actually going to end. If you guys are wondering, yo, Zether, what about the Liberation Army? Well, let's just say Deku ends up handling them in the future when he graduates and becomes a total BADASSS. I know some of you guys are most likely like, yo, dude, just say the word. I don't mind if you get demonetized. Okay, I'm getting sick of that. I don't mind if you get demonetized, but I do. I need my $5 with 45 cents that I make from this video. Come on now. I gotta buy that setup somehow. But anyways, by the end of this, Deku would finally be at the same strength level of Zenitsu, and that fear that Zenitsu once had would be gone. Deku would finally embrace his strengths, and we're just gonna say that by the end of the time skip to when he graduates, he finally ends up learning and mastering the rest of the Thunder God, or the Thunder Breath. No, not Thunder God, but Thunder Breath forms. As that's essentially what Deku ends up doing for the the rest of the years. As I said, Deku and Araka actually end up getting married in kind of a Zenitsu and what's it called? Nezuko fashion. And with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. And honestly, just let me know what you thought about the revamped version of this series on my channel. As I hope you guys enjoyed. Also, sorry if you guys heard that scream in the background. It's just my brother being crazy. But as I said already, I hope you guys enjoyed. Go ahead and go down below and let me know what you guys thought of this new version in case you've seen my old one. And let me know if I hit the mark with Zenitsu. Let me know if you guys enjoyed seeing this, as I know that the Demon Slayer movie is pretty popping right now. So this video might actually get a couple of views. But with that being said, guys, there's going to be 4 videos up top on screen right now that you guys are most likely going to be seeing. Go ahead and click on any single one of those videos, as I'm sure you guys are going to love them if you guys ended up liking this video. But with that being said, guys, you guys all know the drill. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.